The grand chamber of the Galactic Concord was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated at the center of civilized space, a massive crystal station that could hold representatives from 2,000 species. Today, every seat was filled. Today, they would vote on the fate of Earth. Ambassador stood alone at humanity's podium. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades spent fighting battles with words instead of weapons. Behind her, the holographic flag of United Earth flickered in the artificial light. She was the only human in the chamber. The Arbiter of the Concord, a tall creature with 6 arms and skin like polished silver, raised its primary limb for silence. The chamber fell quiet. 2,000 species waited to hear the charges against humanity. The species known as humans, originating from the planet Earth, stand accused of the following violations. The Arbiter announced in a voice that echoed through every translator in the room. Aggressive territorial expansion beyond assigned boundaries, unauthorized genetic modification of agricultural species, dangerous experimentation with faster-than-light technology, unlicensed contact with pre-civilizations, and general disruption of galactic peace and order. Listened to each charge with a calm face. She had heard them all before. The Concord had been building this case for 50 years, ever since humanity first stumbled into the stars and refused to follow the rules that every other species accepted without question. The Arbiter continued. The proposed punishment is total exile from conquered space. All human colonies within conquered borders will be evacuated. All trade agreements will be canceled. All diplomatic relations will end. Humanity will be pushed to the outer edges of the galaxy, forbidden from contact with civilized species for a period of no less than 1,000 standard years. A murmur ran through the chamber. 1,000 years. For a species that had only been spacefaring for 3 centuries, it was a death sentence. Without access to conquered technology and trade, humanity would surely wither and die in the cold darkness between stars. The Arbiter raised its limb again. The vote will now begin. Watched as the holographic display above the chamber began to fill with lights, green for exile, red for mercy, yellow for abstention. The green light spread like a disease-filling sector after sector of the display. The Eth Dominion voted green. The collective voted green. The ancient hegemony of voted green with obvious pleasure. Even the species that humanity had helped, the ones they had traded with and fought beside, voted green. The fear in the chamber was almost visible. Could see it in the way the other ambassadors avoided her eyes. She could hear it in their whispered conversations. Humanity scared them, not because humans were cruel or evil, but because humans were different. In 300 years, humanity had done what took other species 3,000. They adapted, they survived, they grew. They asked questions that polite species never asked. They went places that sensible species avoided. They looked at the impossible and said, "Let us try anyway." The Conquered had expected humanity to be grateful for membership. Instead, humans had been restless, curious, hungry. They bonded with other species in ways that made the older races uncomfortable. They adopted alien children. They married outside their kind. They treated every new world like a puzzle to be solved rather than a resource to be managed. The final vote appeared on the display. 1,847 species in favor of exile, 12 abstentions, 3 opposed. The Arbiter nodded slowly. The motion carries. Humanity is hereby exiled from. Began to laugh. The sound cut through the chamber like a blade. Every eye, every sensor, every attention-focusing organ in the room turned toward the human ambassador. She stood at her podium with her shoulders shaking and tears running down her face, laughing as if she had just heard the funniest joke in the universe. The Arbiter paused, uncertain. "Ambassador, this is highly irregular. The formal decree must be." Reached up and removed the small translation device from her ear. She held it in her palm for a moment, looking at it, then placed it carefully on the podium. When she spoke, it was in English, raw and untranslated. The words meant nothing to the assembly, but her tone needed no translation. She spoke for nearly a minute. Some listeners thought they heard anger in her voice. Others heard sadness. A few of the more perceptive species detected something else entirely. They heard relief. When she finished speaking, bowed once. It was not a bow of submission or defeat. It was the bow of someone leaving a party that had gone on too long, a bow of farewell. Then she walked toward the exit. "Ambassador," the arbiter called, "you must remain for the formal reading of the decree. There are procedures, timelines. Your species has 90 standard days to—" The doors closed behind her. In the chaos that followed, it took the conquered nearly an hour to realize what was happening. By the time security forces reached the human embassy, it was empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of everything. Furniture, computers, artwork, personal belongings, all gone as if humans had never been there at all. Across conquered space, the same scene repeated itself. Human trading posts went dark. Human research stations sealed their doors and stopped responding to communications. Human ships that had been docked at alien ports slipped away quietly, their drives carrying them toward the edges of known space. The ETH Dominion tried to stop a human freighter from leaving their primary shipyard. They sent 3 warships to block its path. The freighter did not fight. It did not run. It simply transmitted a single message in perfect ETH. "We have already left. This is just our shadow passing through." By the time the conquered organized a response, every human in civilized space had vanished. They had not waited for the 90-day deadline. They had not negotiated for better terms. They had not begged or pleaded or made threats. They had simply left. In her private shuttle racing toward the border of human space, finally allowed herself to stop smiling. Her aide, a young man named Thomas, handed her a glass of water with shaking hands. "Ambassador," he said, "what did you say to them?" At the end in English. Took a long drink before answering. "I told them that my grandmother used to say that the worst punishment you can give to someone who hates you is to let them live without you. I told them that we came to the stars looking for friends, and instead we found a room full of frightened children who had never learned to share their toys." Thomas waited, and I told them that we would remember this day, not with anger, not with plans for revenge. We would remember it as the day we stopped asking for permission to exist. Outside the shuttle's windows, the stars stretched into lines as the drive engaged. Ahead lay the unknown. Behind lay everything humanity had built among the alien races, abandoned now, left like a snake's old skin. Closed her eyes. "We gave them 300 years of partnership," she said quietly. 300 years of our best scientists, our bravest explorers, our most patient diplomats, and they still could not see us as anything but a threat. She opened her eyes and looked at the stars ahead. "Let them learn what the galaxy looks like without us." 5 years passed, and the galaxy learned what silence truly meant. High of the collective stood in his office, staring at reports that made his 4 stomachs twist with worry. They were an old species, proud of their 1,000-year membership in the Galactic Concord. They had voted for humanity's exile without hesitation. Humans were dangerous, everyone agreed. Humans were unpredictable. The galaxy would be safer without them. Nowan was not so sure. "Explain this to me again," he said to his economic advisor, a younger with nervous eyes. "How can our entire waste processing industry collapse in 5 years?" The advisor shuffled through holographic documents. "The humans were the only species willing to buy our industrial byproducts, what we considered toxic waste, they called raw materials. They took our chemical runoff and turned it into fuel. They took our contaminated metals and built ships with them. Without human buyers, we have been forced to pay for disposal instead of being paid for resources." Then find other buyers. We have tried, hi. No other species wants what we produce. The Eth call it poison. The hegemony says it is beneath their dignity. Only the humans saw value in our garbage. And sank into his chair, and our food production. Down 30%. Human agricultural scientists developed the drought-resistant crops that feed our outer colonies. Without their expertise, we cannot maintain the yields. We have requested help from the Concord Agricultural Committee, but they say our situation is not a priority. Not a priority. Our people are going hungry. The advisor said nothing. There was nothing to say. They had voted to exile humanity, and now they were discovering exactly how much they had depended on the species they feared. Across conquered space, similar conversations were happening in thousands of government offices. The Eth Dominion had built its military reputation on the backs of human mercenaries and human-trained officers. Without them, their fleet had become slow and predictable. 3 border skirmishes with the hegemony had ended in embarrassing defeats. The Astronomical Research Consortium, once the pride of galactic science, had lost 40% of its best theorists when the humans left. The breakthrough in quantum communication that was supposed to come next year had been delayed indefinitely. The lead researcher, a being made of crystalline light, had reportedly said that working without human colleagues was like trying to fly with one wing. Even the black market suffered. Human traders had been the only ones willing to carry cargo into the forbidden zones, the dangerous regions of space where the Conquered's laws did not reach. Now those routes were empty, and a dozen small species who had depended on smuggled supplies were slowly starving. But the most disturbing thing was not what the Conquered lost, it was what they could not find. The human exclusion zone, as the Conquered now called it, was a patch of darkness on the edge of the galaxy. No signals came out of it. No ships emerged from it. Every probe sent to investigate simply stopped transmitting the moment it crossed the invisible border. At first, the Conquered assumed humanity was dying. The outer regions of the galaxy were harsh and empty, far from the comfortable core worlds where civilization thrived. Surely humans were struggling to survive, eating each other, fighting over scraps. Any day now, they would send desperate messages begging to be let back in. The messages never came. After 3 years of silence, the Conquered sent a scout fleet to investigate. 12 ships crossed into the exclusion zone. Their tracking beacons went dark one by one, like candles blown out by an invisible wind. The ships were not destroyed. There were no explosions, no distress calls, no debris fields. They simply vanished. A year later, one of the ships reappeared at a Conquered border station. It was empty. Its crew of 46 had disappeared without a trace. The only change to the vessel was a small note attached to the captain's chair, written in perfect Conquered standard. We asked them if they wanted to leave. They said no, please stop sending visitors, we are busy. The note was not signed. Panic spread through the Conquered like a disease. What were the humans doing? What were they building? The species who had voted for exile now lay awake at night, imagining human fleets massing in the darkness, human weapons being prepared for revenge. But some beings told different stories. In the lowest levels of the great trading stations, in the bars and brothels where the Conquered's laws were loosely enforced, whispers passed between drinks. A smuggler claimed to have seen the human border. He said there were lights there, millions of lights, more than any single species could produce. He said he saw ships of designs he had never imagined, and heard music on open channels, and received a message in 12 languages welcoming him to somewhere called the Free Reach. A refugee from the ice species, beings who had been conquered by the Eth decades ago, said that humans were taking in the broken and the lost. She said her entire colony had crossed the border and been given a new world to call home. She said humans asked nothing in return except friendship. An elderly scientist of a species so old they had forgotten their own name claimed that a human vessel had approached his research station on the border. The humans had asked questions about his work, shared some of their own findings, and then left a gift, a small device that could generate clean energy from starlight. When he asked why they were sharing such valuable technology with an outsider, the human captain had smiled and said, "Because knowledge belongs to everyone who seeks it." The Conquered dismissed these stories as fantasy. Humans were exiles, outcasts, failures. They could not possibly be thriving in the wasteland they had been pushed into. But the stories kept coming, and the storytellers all had one thing in common: they were smiling. In a secure conference room on the Conquered capital station, the leaders of a dozen major species gathered for an emergency meeting. The topic was not officially recorded, but everyone knew why they were there. "We made a mistake," said the ETH representative, a rare admission from such a proud species. "The humans are not dying, they are growing, and they are taking the outcasts of the galaxy with them." "Perhaps that is a good thing," suggested the delegate. "Let them have the broken and the unwanted. It keeps those problems away from us." "You do not understand," the ETH snapped. "The Eye were our slaves, the monoliths were our mining equipment. These beings are now living with humans as equals. They are learning, they are organizing, they are becoming a force." The room fell silent. For the first time since the Exile vote, the true fear that had driven the decision was spoken aloud. It was not what humanity was. It was what humanity made others become. Humans did not conquer. Humans did not enslave. Humans made friends. They found the scared and the weak and the forgotten, and they showed them how to be strong. They looked at species the Conquered had dismissed as worthless and saw potential. That was why the Conquered had exiled them. And now that gift, that terrible human gift for making others greater, was growing in the darkness beyond the border. The arbiter who had read the exile decree spoke for the first time. "What do we do?" No one had an answer. In her office on New Horizon, the first world humanity had built in the free reach, stood at her window and watched construction drones building the framework of a new university. In 5 years, humanity had established 43 colonies. 17 other species now called the free reach home. The economy was growing at rates that would have been impossible under Conquered regulations. Her aide Thomas entered with a report. "The Conquered sent another probe today. We let it through. It should reach the inner worlds by next week." Nodded. "Good. Let them see everything." "Everything? Are you sure that is wise?" She turned to face him. "Thomas, they exiled us because they were afraid of what we might become. Now we will show them exactly what we have become, and they will realize that their fear was never about what we would do to them." She looked back at the window, at the ships from a dozen species moving peacefully through the sky. Their fear was about what we would do without them. Captain stood on the bridge of the HSV Defiance and watched the stars spin past her windows. The ship was on patrol duty today, guarding the border between the free reach and Conquered space. It was usually quiet work, but never found it boring. Every day on the border was a chance to witness something new. She was 40 years old, born on Earth just 3 years before the exile. Her earliest memories were of the Great Evacuation, of her mother carrying her onto a transport ship while the lights of Lagos faded behind them. She had grown up in the chaos of humanity's rebirth, and she had loved every moment of it. "Captain," said her first officer, a tall eye named Click Whistlehum. She called him Click for short. "Long-range sensors are detecting a small vessel approaching the border. It matches no known Conquered design." Leaned forward in her chair. "Refugees." "Possibly. The ship is damaged. Life support appears to be failing." "Bring us alongside. Prepare for emergency docking." The Defiance moved like a dancer, its engines responding to commands with a smoothness that would have been impossible under Conquered technology restrictions. When humanity was exiled, they had been forced to leave behind the approved engine designs that every Conquered species used. Within 2 years, human engineers had built something better. Within 5, they had built something revolutionary. The refugee ship was small and ugly, a patchwork of stolen parts and desperate repairs. As the Defiance pulled alongside, could see burn marks on the hull, weapons fire. Someone had tried very hard to stop this ship from reaching the border. "Open a channel," she ordered. The flickered to life, showing a cramped cockpit filled with smoke and sparking wires. In the center of the image was a being had never seen before, a creature like a living cloud of blue mist, flickering with tiny lights that pulsed in patterns she could not understand. I am seeking the free reach," the being said. Its voice was strange, like wind chimes in a storm. "I was told. Humans welcome those who have nowhere else to go." Smiled, "You heard correctly. I am captain of the Defiance. What should I call you?" "I am called Sorrow that Fades to Hope by my people. The Conquered calls us the. We are considered non-sentient under their laws, property, things to be owned and used." Click made a noise that had learned to recognize as anger. The Eye had their own history with being called non-sentient. His people had spent 200 years as slaves before the humans came, and saw what the Conquered refused to see. That intelligence could take many forms, and all of them deserved respect. "You are not property here," said firmly. "Prepare for emergency docking. We will get you to safety." As the refugee ship connected to the Defiance, thought about how different this moment was from what she had been taught about the galaxy. In conquered space, the strong took what they wanted from the weak. Species were ranked by age and power, and younger races were expected to know their place. Asking for help was seen as weakness. Offering help without expecting something in return was seen as foolishness. Humanity had tried to follow those rules for 300 years. It never felt right. And now, free from the Conquered's expectations, humans were finally able to be what they had always wanted to be, the people who answered when someone called for help. The called Sorrow that Fades to Hope was brought to the medical bay, where a team of doctors from 4 different species worked together to stabilize its failing life signs. By the time finished her patrol shift and went to check on the refugee, it was already recovering. "I did not believe the stories," Sorrow said when entered the medical bay. "I thought they were lies told to keep slaves hopeful, but this place is real." "It is real," confirmed. "And you can stay as long as you want. We have a colony on one of our outer worlds, other refugees who escaped the Conquered over the past few years. They would be happy to welcome you. There are others, my kind, living free. Over 2,000 now. They are helping us design new sensor systems. It turns out that beings made of living gas have very good ideas about detecting energy patterns." Sorrow's lights pulsed in a pattern that's translator identified as joy mixed with disbelief. "And you let them work with you, as equals." "Of course, that is how we do things here." There was quiet for a long moment. Then it asked, "Why? The Conquered always said humans were dangerous because they were selfish, that you expanded because you wanted to take everything for yourselves, but you take nothing from us, you only give." Sat down beside the medical bed and considered her answer carefully. It was a question she had been asked many times by many species, and she had never found a perfect answer. "When humans were alone on Earth, we spent most of our history fighting each other," she said finally. "We killed and conquered and enslaved because we thought there was not enough for everyone. But when we reached the stars and saw how big the universe was, something changed. We realized that there was enough space, enough resources, enough time. The only thing there was not enough of was connection." She leaned forward. "Humans are social creatures. We are not happy alone. We need friends, partners, family. The Conquered thought that was a weakness, that our need to connect with other species was dangerous, but it is actually our greatest strength. We build better when we build together. We dream bigger when we dream with others. And we are stronger when our strength comes from lifting each other up instead of pushing each other down." Sorrow's lights pulsed slowly, processing this information. "The Conquered fears you because you make allies." "They fear us because we make equals," corrected. The conquered is based on hierarchy, strong species on top, weak species on bottom, and everyone knowing their place. Humanity never accepted that system. We looked at species like the Eye and the monoliths and the beings the conquered dismissed as animals or tools, and we saw people. That terrified them. Because if the weak become strong, then the strong are no longer needed. Yes. The medical bay doors opened, and Click entered with a data pad in his clawed hands. "Captain, we have received updated population reports from New Horizon. The Free Reach now has over 8 billion inhabitants across 62 colony worlds, 17 founding species and 43 observer species." Smiled. 10 years after the Exile, and humanity was no longer alone. They had built something that the conquered never could have imagined, a civilization based not on power but on partnership, not on fear but on friendship. "And the conquered?" she asked. "Their probe crossed into our space yesterday. We are letting it record everything, as President ordered. The economic situation in conquered territory continues to deteriorate. 3 more minor species have officially requested information about emigrating to the Free Reach." Nodded. "Process their requests, and make sure the probe gets good footage of the Unity Festival next week. Let the conquered see what their outcasts have built." She turned back to sorrow that fades to hope. "Rest now. When you are healed, we will take you to your people, and if you ever want to contribute to our community, you will be welcome. But there is no requirement, no debt to repay. We help because helping is what we do." She left the medical bay and walked to the observation deck, where the stars of the Free Reach spread out before her like diamonds on black velvet. Somewhere out there, the conquered was watching. They were seeing human ships crewed by dozens of species. They were recording cities where former slaves walked beside former masters, where ancient enemies shared meals and stories, where the impossible happened every day because nobody had told the Free Reach what was supposed to be impossible. Let them watch, thought. Let them see what happens when you throw away the people who refuse to hate. Let them understand what they could have had if they had only been brave enough to share. Behind her, the Defiance hummed with the energy of 100 different species working together in harmony. This was what humanity had built in Exile. Not an empire, not a weapon, a family. And they were just getting started. The hegemony of had waited a long time for this moment. For 10,000 years they had been the silent power behind the galactic conquered. They were the oldest species in civilized space, the first to build empires among the stars. Other races respected them. Most races feared them. But for centuries the hegemony had been patient. They followed the rules. They played the game of diplomacy. They waited. Then the humans came. The hegemony had watched humanity with cold interest from the very beginning. They had seen a young species stumble into the galaxy with no idea how small they were. They had expected humans to bow, to accept their place at the bottom of the hierarchy, to be grateful for whatever scraps the conquered allowed them. Instead, humans had asked questions. They had pushed boundaries. They had made friends with species that the hegemony wanted to keep weak and isolated. Every year, humanity grew stronger. Every year, their influence spread further. Every year, the hegemony's patience wore thinner. The Exile vote was supposed to solve the problem forever. The hegemony had worked behind the scenes for decades to make it happen, spreading fear of humanity through whispered rumors and carefully placed evidence. When the vote finally came, it was the hegemony's greatest victory. But victory was never enough for the hegemony. They wanted more. They wanted everything. 15 years after the Exile, the hegemony made their move. The attack on the came without warning. 300 hegemony warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. The defense fleet, weakened by years of economic troubles and the loss of human-trained officers, lasted less than 4 hours. Hyan sent a desperate message to the Galactic Conquered as hegemony troops landed on his planet. "We need help. Send everything you have." The Conquered responded with a fleet of 500 ships from a dozen species. It was the largest military force assembled in 3 centuries. It should have been more than enough to push back the hegemony invasion. The battle lasted 1 day. The Conquered fleet was destroyed. It was not a defeat. It was a massacre. The hegemony ships moved with coordination and precision that the Conquered could not match. Their weapons were more powerful. Their shields were stronger. Their tactics were perfect. When the last Conquered ship fled the battlefield, the hegemony admiral broadcast a message on every channel. The age of pretending has ended. The Conquered was always a lie, a game the hegemony allowed you to play because it amused us. That game is over. Submit or be destroyed. Within 1 month, the hegemony had conquered 3 conquered species completely. 5 more were under siege. The remaining members of the Conquered met in emergency session, but there was nothing to discuss. They had no weapons that could match the hegemony. They had no strategies that could overcome 10,000 years of military experience. They had nothing except fear. Then someone said the word that no one wanted to say. Humans. The chamber fell silent. The ETH representative shook his head violently. No, we cannot, after what we did to them. What choice do we have? Asked the delegate, his voice broken with despair. My people are dying. The hegemony burns our cities while we sit here and argue about pride. If the humans can help us, we must ask. They will refuse. They have every right to refuse. Perhaps, but we must try. After 3 days of debate, the Galactic Conquered made a decision that would have seemed impossible just a year before. They would send an envoy to the Free Reach. They would ask humanity for help. The envoy was a ETH diplomat named Aaron. He had been chosen because he had once worked with humans before the Exile and was considered least likely to offend them. He made the journey to the border of the Free Reach alone, in a small diplomatic vessel marked with the symbols of peace. When he crossed the border, he expected to be captured. He expected to be interrogated. He expected, perhaps, to be killed. Instead, he was greeted by a human patrol ship that escorted him directly to New Horizon, the capital of the Free Reach. The journey took 3 days, and during that time, Aaron saw things that shattered everything he thought he knew about the species his people had exiled. He saw cities that floated in the upper atmosphere of gas giants, their spires reaching toward the stars. He saw agricultural worlds where crops grew in impossible colors, designed to feed species with 100 different nutritional needs. He saw shipyards building vessels of designs he had never imagined, crewed by beings who should have been enemies but worked together like family. He saw happiness. He saw peace. He saw a civilization that had taken everything the Conquered threw away and built something beautiful. When he finally arrived on New Horizon and was brought before President, Aaron felt something he had never expected to feel: shame. Was 70 years old now, her hair completely gray and her face lined with decades of leadership. But her eyes were sharp, and her voice was steady as she welcomed the Conquered envoy to her office. Ambassador Aaron, she said, gesturing to a chair. I must admit, I never thought I would see a ETH diplomat in the Free Reach. Please sit. Would you like something to drink? Aaron sat, his hands trembling slightly. President, I come on behalf of the Galactic Conquered. We are facing a crisis. The hegemony of. We know about the hegemony, interrupted gently. We have been watching. We have seen the attacks. We have counted the dead. Then you understand why I am here. The Conquered needs help. We need human ships, human soldiers, human strategy. Without your assistance, the hegemony will conquer everything. Was quiet for a long moment. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city spread below them. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. 15 years ago, you voted to exile my people. You pushed us to the edge of the galaxy and left us to die. You called us dangerous. You called us a threat. You looked at everything we had given to your civilization and decided that we were not worth keeping. Aaron lowered his head. We made a terrible mistake. Yes, you did. Turn to face him. Now the hegemony is showing the galaxy what true danger looks like. They are doing what you feared we would do, conquering, enslaving, destroying. And you have come to ask us to save you from them. Please, Aaron whispered. Millions have already died. Millions more will die if the hegemony is not stopped. I know we have no right to ask for your help. I know we deserve whatever anger you feel. But surely you cannot want to see the galaxy burn. Was silent for so long that Aaron thought she might refuse to answer at all. Then she sat down across from him and looked into his eyes. You exiled us because you feared what we might become, she said. You were afraid we would grow too powerful, make too many allies, upset the balance of your precious hierarchy. Now you want us to become exactly what you feared, a military force capable of crushing the hegemony. You want us to be your weapon. I want you to be our saviors. They are the same thing, leaned forward. If we destroy the hegemony for you, what happens next? Does the conquered welcome us back? Do we get seats on your councils, trade agreements, treaties? And then what? In another 50 years, when humanity is even stronger, will you vote to exile us again? Aaron had no answer. He had asked himself the same questions during the long journey here, and he had found nothing to say. Sat back. I will bring your request to the Council of the Free Reach. We will discuss it. We will vote. And whatever we decide, you will be returned safely to conquered space. That is more consideration than you ever gave us. She stood, and Aaron understood that the meeting was over. As he was escorted back to his quarters, Aaron passed a window overlooking a park where children were playing. Human children ran alongside young. Wisps floated above monolith crystals, and a dozen other species mixed and laughed together. He stopped and watched them for a long time. He thought about the conquered, with its strict hierarchies and careful separations. He thought about the hegemony, with its ancient cruelty and hunger for power. Then he thought about this place, where every being he had seen looked genuinely happy. Maybe humanity was dangerous, he realized, but not in the way the conquered had feared. Humans were dangerous because they made something like this look possible. And now the conquered had to hope that humanity was also forgiving. The Council of the Free Reach met for 7 days. Representatives from every species in the Confederation gathered in the Great Hall on New Horizon. Humans sat beside floated above monoliths. Creatures of flesh and light and crystal and gas argued and debated and tried to decide what kind of civilization they wanted to be. Some wanted revenge. A elder named Sharp Blade Cutsdeep spoke for many when she said that the conquered deserved to suffer. They called us animals, she reminded the council. They enslaved us for 200 years. Let them learn what it means to be helpless. Others wanted isolation. A human economist argued that helping the conquered would cost resources better spent on their own growth. We have built something precious here. Why risk it for people who threw us away? But sat quietly through all the arguments, listening and watching. When the 7th day came and the council asked for her opinion, she stood slowly and addressed the room. I have been president of the Free Reach for 12 years, she said. In that time, I have watched our confederation grow from a handful of desperate refugees to a civilization of billions. I have seen species who were once enemies become family. I have seen the impossible become routine. She paused, looking around at the faces of so many different beings. When the conquered exiled us, they expected us to fail. They thought we would die in the darkness, or that we would become bitter and hateful, or that we would spend all our energy planning revenge. Instead, we chose to build. We chose to welcome. We chose to become something better than what we left behind. Sharp Blade Cutsdeep clicked her mandibles impatiently. And now you want to save the people who hurt us, after everything they did. No, said. I want to save the people who will die if we do nothing. The hegemony is not attacking the conquered leadership. They are attacking colonies and cities and homes. The beings who are dying never voted for anything. They are farmers and teachers and children who happen to be born under the wrong flag. The room was quiet. If we let them die because we are angry at their governments, we become exactly what the conquered always feared, a power that uses its strength for selfish reasons. We prove them right. But if we help, not because we forgive but because we believe all people deserve protection, we prove them wrong. We show the galaxy what humanity really is. "And what if they exile us again when this is over?" asked a monolith counselor, its crystal form pulsing with worried light. Smiled sadly. "Then we will know that we made the right choice anyway. Doing good because it is rewarded is just business. Doing good because it is right, even when it costs us, is who we want to be." The vote was close, 23 species in favor, 19 against, 4 abstentions. The free reach would help. 2 weeks later, the Hegemony fleet was celebrating its latest victory when long-range sensors detected something strange. A shadow was moving through space, larger than anything they had ever seen. When the shadow finally resolved into individual contacts, the Hegemony Admiral felt something he had not experienced in centuries: fear. The Free Reach Armada was not an army, it was a statement. Human dreadnoughts formed the core, massive ships bristling with weapons that should not have existed. Beside them flew swarm carriers, each one containing thousands of deadly fighter craft. Ships pulsed with energy that blurred the line between technology and life. Monolith vessels, grown rather than built, moved with eerie grace. And surrounding them all were the ships of 40 other species, each one bringing their own unique gifts to the fleet. But the most terrifying thing was not the size of the armada or the power of its weapons. It was where the fleet appeared. Not at the front lines, not at the besieged worlds. The Free Reach Armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the Hegemony. Admiral, son born 3 years after the Exile, stood on the bridge of the flagship and broadcast on every frequency in the galaxy. His message was simple. "This is Admiral of the Free Reach Confederation. We are here to end the Hegemony's war. We will not fire unless we are attacked. We will not invade unless we are resisted. But understand this clearly. The age of conquest is over. The Hegemony will withdraw from all occupied territories. All prisoners will be released. All reparations will be paid." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We are not doing this for the conquered. We are not doing this for revenge. We are doing this because someone has to stand up and say that enough is enough. No one gets to be the conqueror anymore. Not the Hegemony, not the conquered, not even us." The Hegemony commander laughed and ordered his fleet to attack. He had 10,000 years of military tradition behind him. He had weapons that had crushed every enemy the Hegemony had ever faced. He had absolute confidence in his superiority. The battle lasted 4 hours. It was not a fight. It was a lesson. The Free Reach ships moved with coordination that should have been impossible, species that had never worked together before anticipating each other's moves as if they shared a single mind. Human strategy combined with speed, combined with sensors, combined with monolith resilience. Every strength, every weakness covered. When it was over, the Hegemony fleet was disabled but not destroyed. Their ships floated helplessly, their weapons drained and their engines dark, while the Free Reach Armada surrounded them like a teacher waiting for a difficult student to understand. The Hegemony surrendered within the hour. The aftermath took months to sort out. Occupied worlds were liberated. Prisoners were returned. The Hegemony was stripped of its military capabilities and forced to accept observer status in a new organization that would eventually replace the conquered. And through it all, the Galactic Conquered waited nervously for humanity to present its bill. When the formal offer came, full reinstatement, senior council seats, unlimited trade access, everything humanity had been before, President declined. Her final message to the conquered chambers was broadcast across the galaxy. She stood alone at a podium, just as she had 15 years before when the Exile vote was announced. But this time, there were no tears in her eyes, only peace. 15 years ago, you voted to exile humanity because you feared what we might become. You were right to be afraid, though not for the reasons you imagined. You were afraid we would conquer. Instead, we built. You were afraid we would hate. Instead, we welcomed. You were afraid we would take revenge. Instead, we offered mercy. She let the silence stretch. We do not want our seats back. We do not want to return to a system that never truly accepted us. What we want is for the galaxy to become something better than it was. The free reach is open to any species that wants to join us, not as junior members, not as probationary guests, but as equals. The only requirement is that you leave your hierarchies and your hatreds at the border. She smiled slightly. You voted us out. We have built something better. The door is open if any of you want to join us, but we will never again ask for a seat at a table that was never meant for us. The transmission ended. In the years that followed, dozens of species left the conquered to join the free reach. Some were small and forgotten, thrilled to be treated as equals for the first time in their history. Others were large and powerful, recognizing that the old ways could not survive in a galaxy that had seen what cooperation could accomplish. The conquered did not collapse, but it changed. Slowly, painfully, it began to adopt some of the principles that the free reach demonstrated. Hierarchies softened. Old rivalries faded. The hegemony, stripped of its military power, was forced to earn its place through contribution rather than conquest. 50 years after the exile, a young eth historian traveled to New Horizon to interview the elderly for an archive project. Was 95 years old, her body frail but her mind still sharp. The historian asked the question that everyone wanted answered. Why did you not take revenge? You had the power to conquer the galaxy. You had every right to make them pay for what they did to your people. Why did you choose mercy instead? Was quiet for a long time. Outside her window, ships from 100 species moved through the sky, carrying beings who would never have met if humanity had not refused to die in the darkness they had been pushed into. They exiled us because they thought we were monsters, she said finally. The only way to prove them wrong was to be better than they ever imagined. Revenge would have made us them. It would have proven every fear they had about us. She looked at the young historian with eyes that had seen the galaxy transform. We did not leave to show them what they lost. We left to show ourselves what we could become. And it turns out that what we could become was a family big enough to hold anyone who wanted to belong. The historian nodded slowly, writing down every word. And what about the future? What do you hope humanity will do next? Smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young woman who had laughed at the exile vote and walked out of the conquered chambers with her head held high. What we have always done, she said. Build, explore, welcome. We were never meant to be alone among the stars. Neither was anyone else. And now that we have finally found each other, we are going to spend the rest of forever proving that the galaxy is big enough for everyone. She turned back to the window. That is what humanity does. We make room. Outside, the stars burned in their endless patterns, and the ships of the free reach carried their crews toward a future that no one had ever dared to imagine. A future built by the people who were told they had no right to exist, who were pushed into darkness and responded with light. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth. Humanity had built a home for everyone instead.